I was just setting up the lights for this video, and then I saw Umagod's video pop up on YouTube, and I figured, yeah, this is a reasonable time to see more and more videos like this. So it's been a year. First of all, I don't know where Umagod finds the time to, I'm strapped for time, but he's doing so much added production value to his videos that, there's no way mine is going to match his video ever. Probably ever in my entire FPV career will I be able to match his production quality. I just don't have the time. But I also didn't watch his video because I don't want to be biased about what I say compared to what he says. So when I first got my DJI system, I'll go through like the story of my progression with the DJI system. I also have the Eachine EV300D. This is actually a new version of the 300D. It's a really interesting story I'll talk about at the end. Or there's like a link to the timestamp in the description below. But when I first got my DJI goggles and the whole system, it was very, very, very early on. I had it several months. I'm absolutely privileged and blessed and so thankful to have made the cut to get access to the DJI system several months before release. And when I first got it, it didn't even work. I had to update the software just to get it to start working. And so over the next several months, really just 2 months because they neglected it for a month, I wrote them like a 2-page paper on all the things that need to be improved or changed to make it a viable product. And unfortunately, they kind of threw out all of that. But then I started talking to one of the engineers in China about all the things in the goggles. And basically, I would tell him what I wanted, and he would just say, no, we can't do that, or we thought of it, or we couldn't, or for whatever reason. And of course, on the top of my list was, can you please make it do 5.8 analog also? Because why wouldn't you do that? Because it would just be a no-brainer. Everybody would only buy the DJI goggles and just use analog until the digital is cost-effective enough or new ones, whatever. Fast forward to my actual experience using them. So when I first started using it, it was like super duper alpha, pre-alpha software, and that's what my first review was based on. Now they weren't awful, but I was a little bit optimistic in my review. Mainly because the first time you put these things on, you start looking through the screens and looking through the camera and flying around, you are so taken aback by how amazingly crisp, like my eyes were tearing, they were watering because I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Like, I know that sounds crazy and overly emotional, but I'm not kidding you. I was just floating around and I'm like, oh my God, am I watching my post-flight GoPro? Like, what is this right now? Is this really like the video from the quad in real time? Is this possible? And HD isn't new. I was using the Connex system way back when, and that system was not even remotely comparable to this one, but it was a digital, almost HD system. Their HX camera that they came out with, like the second version of their camera that they came out with, was a lot better. It was a lot closer to the DJI system, but it wasn't even remotely in the same ballpark, because while the video would look great if you didn't move the quad around and it was within like 50 feet of you, as soon as you started moving the quad around and moving in weird positions, it just hated you. And it was blotchy and blocky, and the signal robustness and link quality was just awful. Today, compared to the DJI system, I would consider the Connex system analog. Actually, probably worse than analog because the link quality was so poor compared to analog. It was barely good enough for racing. However, it did have the latency step up on the DJI goggles. So I'll talk about it a little bit later as well. So I started using DJI goggles. I noticed that the penetration is about the same as analog originally when I first got it. The latency was acceptable, well within acceptable range. I'm not a huge latency snob. Sure, I like lower latency, but I'm not going to go to crazy lengths to get like an extra half millisecond or something lower. I'm totally cool with reasonable latency to be able to fly. I'm not racing, and that's a very important point to make. I'll make a little bit later on. I'm only doing kind of freestyle flying, maybe for production, various things, and I'm not too concerned about 10 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds. Within 50 milliseconds to me is totally fine for goggles, and not control. I want the control to be a little bit quicker, but for all that stuff, up to, 50 is a little pushing it, but up to 50 is totally cool with me. And so the latency was totally fine. In high quality mode, the latency did go up, and I did notice it. But what was the bigger issue was that when you started to get in sketchier areas where the signal would kind of cut in and out, and it didn't happen miles away back then. It happened within maybe a couple hundred feet back then with like sort of almost somewhat open line of sight. the latency would get variable. So the control and the video latency would just be kind of all over the place, and it made it really hard to kind of keep the quad under control if you're trying to do like find things or thread small gaps or do something like that or chase something. Or it just became a little bit sketchy to the point where I was unenthusiastic and unconfident. I wasn't confident enough to use the system as a regular everyday system. And so then I stopped using it because I'm like, okay, well, nice try, but it's getting there. Maybe the next version is going to work out. So then a bunch of other people wanted to give it a try. They contacted me and I gladly sent it out to them. I'm happy to share whatever. And so this has passed through 4 or 5 hands, and that's why it's dented and the antenna is broken, and it's heavily used. This is a heavily used DJI piece of DJI equipment, and it stood the test of the punishment that it's been through shipping around the country and being kind of punished by multiple people. Now, I know it looks like I throw around a lot of devices and products in my videos, but in reality, I'm just doing that because I'm trying to save time, because it's not worth me being so gentle with it so that you can sit around waiting. I don't like wasting anyone's time, but I am actually very good with my equipment and electronics. I use it very much, but I also keep it in very good shape. Both my quads and my cell phones and everything else, they're all in kind of pristine condition. The quads kind of get punished a little bit here and there, but for the most part, things look better than they should given the amount of use that I have under my belt with the particular item. So this one, with this sort of punishment, it's been very used, because I would never have allowed my goggles to be dented like this. But yeah, I actually caused that dent. I think somebody else caused this dent. So now let's talk about the improvements. And I don't even know what they all are, but I'll talk about what the improvements are that I personally noticed. And when I did pick up the system after maybe 7 months, it finally came back to me. And I've been using it almost nonstop it's been my primary for the past 4 months, like 3 to 4 months solid. I have been using this thing just like almost every day, before work, after work. I'm always testing things, constantly testing motors and things. And it's awesome. It's awesome beyond belief. It's still not good for racing, but it's awesome beyond belief. The penetration of this system is beyond any analog system I have ever used, and I've used 1200 milliwatt analog systems. And the thing about analog is that if it's not high quality, if it's not well managed by the actual VTX, it's kind of really crummy, and you'll be like, why am I using 400 milliwatts and I still can't see when I'm just 100 feet away? And that's because it's just a really crummy VTX. There's very few VTXs that are really high quality and give you that really good signal quality and robustness and image. One of them is TBS. Obviously, TBS stuff is always good. It always works. Another one is Rush. I love Rush. All the VTXs are awesome. They're actually my number one. I prefer them over TBS because their VTXs actually have mounting holes, and I like mounting things. Because even though my quads look like crap when I build them, I am a little OCD about how things are actually mounted. Anyways, where analog fails, DJI excels. Analog absolutely blows in situations like flying in downtown. This video that you're watching is at a job site, at an actual production site, which we had full regulation, everything closed, coverage, full permitting, everything to fly around. And this is just one video clip that I happen to have after almost a year, where I was flying analog, and honestly, if I didn't have the experience to trust my quad and do what I do, I don't even. This is a Rush tank VTX on this quad as well. I could barely see what I was doing. My heart was pounding while I'm flying around these buildings and doing these things, and the FPV feed looked worse than what you're seeing in the DVR. It was really nerve-wracking, and if there was like a power line in my way, I'm screwed. Pretty much going straight into the power line. It was very, very nerve-wracking to fly in this situation with the extreme reflections that the area has. Since then, I don't have any example footage, and I don't really have any footage extras to show. Here, I'll move things around just so it looks like something happened in the video. Make rationale for this to even be a video. Since I started using the DJI goggles more and more, I have tested in these situations, and these goggles are awesome. The whole system is awesome. They don't care about reflections. They just don't care. In fact, they may even help it. And the penetration, Analog systems can penetrate very, very well, but the thing that the DJI system does so well is it keeps the clarity of the image so crisp and clear that it's just remarkable. Now, previously, where the digital did kind of fall flat on its face is not the link quality, but the signal quality representation of what's happening. So with analog, you kind of get this fade in and fade out. You know that if you're getting static within a couple hundred feet, it's probably nothing, or it's probably the orientation of your quad or something, because it's almost impossible for you to just randomly lose link or video feed a couple hundred feet away. So you're just like, oh, I'll just wait and I'll ride it out. But if you're far away and you start seeing snow or signal loss or something, then you're like, oh crap, there's something going on. I need to figure out what's happening, or I'm going to lose my quad. With the digital system, when you started seeing any breakup or issues, you almost immediately lost the signal completely. Not immediately, but it didn't give you much warning. Now, it also did this back then, but now it's a lot more clear when you're losing signal quality, because the link is so much more robust now after all the software updates that the transition from excellent to mediocre to not so good to danger is actually visible in the goggles. Specifically, the focus mode gets all blocky on the sides and then starts getting blocky in the middle, and then also the signal indicator in the lower left of the screen actually turns red before you lose your signal instead of after you lose signal, like not like anything, but like you would expect it to. And so it has gotten a whole lot better in that department, and you can actually start to feel it out. Like analog, you really feel out the video feed and you know what's going on with the quad based on what you see with the static and where you are, because it's kind of going to be consistent in each location. Now, when you do start breaking things up in the DJI goggles, it still has a little bit of variation in the latency, but unless you're doing like breakneck speed racing or like something really crazy, it's very hard to believe that a fluctuation of 10-15 milliseconds is really going to cause any problems for anybody, unless you're just doing crazy wild fast things and your quad rotation rate is like 1500 and you're just going nuts. So in that same note, I would say this is not good for racing. It's still not good for racing, even with the Vista system, which I have lost among all this stuff here. It's still not good for racing because the latency is not quite on par with analog, and you kind of sort of do need to know what's happening with the quad. And more importantly, it's not consistent. You'll go around the same turn 3 times and you'll have 3 different experiences with the digital system. And so I think that that's where Connex did excel, is that it didn't have any latency fluctuations. It was always the same latency. Your video just sucked if you were in a sucky location. So that's one area that it would be interesting if DJI added a race mode. Now let's talk about the downsides of the goggles and downsides of the controller, because that's something I usually focus on all my videos, which is a very nice, happy, positive thing. If you take a look at my goggles, I have the analog adapter here on the side here, but I don't actually use it for analog. I use it because it has a BEC on board that will convert up to 6S down into 2S, 3S, 4S, whatever the goggles normally take, which is up to 4S, which is very annoying. The goggles also, I don't know why they didn't make it 6S. It would take no extra effort for them to put a nice, robust BEC in there. Now I have to rely on this crummy, who knows who designed or put together BEC with the hopes that it doesn't burn out on me. Now, I have been using it on jobs and whatnot, so I am very loose and fast and loose with my rules, but I'm not thrilled about using this random BEC on the side of my goggles just to be able to run whatever battery I want and mitigate the chance of my barrel plug going weak or losing connection because I keep plugging it and unplugging it. And that's another thing that is really hilarious about these goggles. There's no on-off switch, which is really weird. Other than that, the other complaints that I had are pretty much nullified because I've just gotten either used to it to the point where it doesn't really matter anymore. And the biggest complaint I had with the goggles specifically, other than the lack of 5.8, was that the screen is just ginormous. It's just a massive screen in there. And with the foam that's included with the goggles, there's just no way to get your eyes, even without foam, there's no way to get your eyes close enough to those lenses to be able to see the entire screen. Fortunately, they put the ability for you to actually shrink the screen inside the goggles. And also in my original review, I said that there was one big screen. It looks like there's one big screen, but there's in fact two separate screens. So if that matters to you, that's there. The goggles are designed for somebody with a very wide face. I don't know why. Very wide, very flat face. And so if you see what I did to my foam, it was kind of unusable until I hacked up the foam, and now my face actually fits into the goggles. I can get my eyes closer to the screen, to the lenses, and I can actually see the entire screen with the OSD components of the digital system on the outside peripheral. Now, they have updated the OSD system in the goggles to actually see OSD stuff from Betaflight as well. This thing does have a serial link to Betaflight if you wire it up. And so now you actually get a lot of OSD components on the screen with your feed, which is great. And you can actually see them because they're not like hidden in the very corners of the periphery. And so that's nice, and that's obviously going to continue to improve. They haven't gotten it all in there, but they've consistently been improving it from step by step, from software version to software version. So it's really, really nice to see that. And also you can now control PIDs and whatnot from the goggle OSD into Betaflight, so that's really nice. All that stuff's going to improve. I really don't have much complaints about the goggles anymore, other than the fact that it really should do 6S. And these antennas that it comes with are apparently really not good, but I'm just keeping it stock because I just want to see what stock can do, and I'm really, really impressed with stock overall. The goggles could be a little bit smaller, but yeah, that's about it. I mean, it's got adequate cooling for the lenses so that they don't fog up, and I'm totally okay with the goggles. I really have minimal complaints with the goggles. Now, looking at the controller, that's a whole nother story. The controller is a little bit of a mess, in my opinion. It's not bad. I mean, it's just a Phantom controller. It's not really different than a typical Phantom controller. The number one complaint I would have about this controller is that, first of all, it doesn't have full-size gimbals. It has actually smaller gimbals than the X9 Lite. Yeah, it's got smaller gimbals than the X9 Lite, which is sort of weird. Yeah, it's just really sort of weird. And then the next issue for me personally is that the spring tension on these sticks is really loose. It really should be, at least give you the option of making it a lot more firm. The spring tension on my X9 Lite is at maximum as well, but at maximum it's like just barely appropriate for me, for my feel, what I prefer. And it's also a little bit thick. It's a little bit thick, and the signal quality of the controller is just nowhere near as good as the goggles. It's not bad, and it only really matters if you are kind of low to the ground or doing things that is going to cause you to lose signal, but it's worse than I would want it to be. And the main reason why I say it's worse and why it's an issue is because if you flip over in a crash by accident, and first of all, if you flip over in a crash by accident, it goes into and you disarm, because that's what we all do, obviously, you disarm. The thing goes into like low power mode, so it just loses signal to everything to begin with, and then you kind of walk around and regain your video feed, but then your controller doesn't link up, so you can't turtle or do anything. You gotta literally walk up to the quad to get the controller to actually link up again, which is very frustrating, and I don't know why they did that. It would be great if it would just like maintain control link to be able to turtle or something. Whatever that's going on, the control link is not as good as the video link, no matter how high you hold the controller. I've held it up above my head, doesn't seem to matter. It's not nearly as good as the goggles, and there are two separate links between the quad and the controller and the goggles. Now, the reason why I'm using the DJI controller is because this Vista unit, which is the only unit that I use and the only thing I recommend, the air unit is so big, we really don't need a DVR on the quad. The DVR quality, in my opinion, the DVR quality or the video quality from the DVR is still not good enough to use for very much. So it's not really useful to me to carry around all that air unit. And I'm really thankful for CADX for, I don't know who, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to skip over that. So this Vista unit is awesome. It performs equally as good as the air unit in my testing. Obviously, the air unit has diversity on it, so it's a little bit better here and there, but for the most part, this thing performs really awesome. The issues that I have with the Vista are what you see right up front here, my UFL connector, which I absolutely despise. I hate UFL connectors so much. Yes, they have some appropriate uses, and those are okay, but for VTXs and things like this, they should never be used. Even on like super micros, I want an MMCX. Look at this thing. I was so gentle with pulling this thing off to replace my antenna, and the whole thing ripped off the whole PCB, and this entire Vista unit is dead because my UFL. I tried to solder it back on, but that obviously didn't work out. As you can see, I kind of slipped a bit, and I got solder all up in the UFL. And I can't take it off because if I do, the whole trace is going to, it's just absolute mess. But this little unit has both video and control. And knowing me and how incredibly lazy I am, I just use the DJI controller because I'm just way too lazy. I just can't fiddle with the Crossfire. And more important than that is that I just can't fiddle with two antennas on the quad. It's such a pain. And so I had longer antennas made, which are coming to FPV Cycle very soon. And I had the short, oh, there's a shorter one. Here's a shorter one. I don't know why on earth it comes with such a short antenna, but here is the longer one that is coming to FPV Cycle very soon. It's like 2 or 3 times as long, and the stem on it is 2 or 3 times as long, and the wire on it is twice as long as well, so you can actually route it through your quad. Here is what it looks like on a quad. This is the Cineglide frame that recently come out that I haven't made a video for yet. The wire of the camera is also very short, and I also have 200mm wires coming for the obvious stuff. Just beyond me why they don't get the obvious stuff correct. But anyways, this is the setup that I have, and it's on FPV Cycle right now, and this is just a godsend. It's just amazing to be able to put the antenna this high up. It goes above the well, this is an analog version of the frame, but it goes high above the other one. It goes high above the camera and high above the battery, so you have much better signal retention and signal quality overall. And yeah, I would strongly recommend DJI. And if you're buying a pair of goggles today and you're considering either the HDO2 or the Orqas, these are both great goggles, and analog absolutely has its place still, absolutely 100%. But I also feel that you can do great analog with the cheapo pair of Eachine goggles, which I don't have with me right now, but the EV300D or something. It's a link in the description below to it if you're looking for like a cheap pair of goggles that are really good. It's the best option that exists in the world today, and it's awesome. And speaking of Eachine, let's now talk about the Eachine goggles. But before that, let me just solidify my opinion or point at this point. If you're considering one of these expensive analog goggles, if you have a bunch of analog quads and you really want a good analog experience, you get either one of these. The pros and cons of both of these are obvious at this point. I personally have been using the HDO2 more, but that's only because the fan actually defogs the lenses. It actually defogs the lenses, and the fan on the Orqas doesn't really defog the lenses. So if it's at all muggy outside or hot in any way, I always use the HDO2s because I know that my lenses will not fog up, and I just don't have the patience to deal with fogging up lenses. And in that same breath, I would say that the Orqas also have a splash screen that takes like 30 seconds to go away, and I haven't updated my software in a while, so I'm sure it's gone by now, but this stupid Santa Claus on the screen just doesn't go away ever. It's so frustrating. Another annoying thing about the Orqas is that if you leave the battery plugged in, it will drain the battery 100%, whereas if you leave the battery plugged into the HDO2s, it will not drain the battery at all. And the same thing goes for the Eachine goggles as well. Both of them are awesome. The DVR on the Orqas are second to none. They're as good as it gets, as good as the other thing by IRC, which I don't recall the name right now. The DVR on the HDO2 is complete garbage, but the other huge benefit that the HDO2 has that the Orqas don't is this antenna setup. This antenna setup by TrueRC is the hands down the very best antenna setup that I've ever used on any analog goggles, and I'm an awful person to test antennas. Like, I can't tell the difference between a good and a not so good antenna. But when I started using this particular setup, these dual pair setup things, I was actually surprised by how much better it was than my previous setup, which was a directional and an omni, which, oh, these are two directionals, but a directional and an omni, which is what I typically use. And these work better than an omni, and they're directional at the same time. So the fact that the whole goggle is so compact and it fits in so nicely into my backpack just makes this goggle so much more convenient to use overall. However, the lack of a good DVR is just mind-blowing. It hurts my brain to understand how this company could put out such an expensive product and not care enough to update the DVR. Just painful to me. All right. Oh, also the per eye adjustment of the optics is nice, very nice to have. If it wasn't on here, I wouldn't miss it. And it is a little annoying because if I do go to wipe my lenses, it always changes the focus. So I'm always, or if I take the goggles off my face the wrong way, I'm always fiddling with these fine adjustments to get them really fine-tuned. Okay, finally, let's talk about this Eachine pair of goggles, which is interesting because it's very interesting, actually. Very, very interesting. So this, okay, first of all, this is my interaction with Banggood about this product has taught me more about Eachine as a company than anything else. And previously, I have always said that I think Eachine is an awesome company because they can put so much product out the door at such a reasonable price that is the company that I personally would want to have control of if I could choose a company to have control of in FPV, just because they can do such amazing things at such amazing price points. Now, fast forward to today, I still feel that way, but I've learned that, maybe I shouldn't be telling you this, I don't know, but I've learned that Eachine is really, it's not a Banggood company per se, but it is operated by the Banggood marketers. So the kind of lead marketer of my little group of marketing people in Banggood that I talk to and work with regularly got really upset at me. Often they get upset at me for my reviews because I just say the truth, everything. Like they just get upset that they send me something that's for sale and I say it doesn't work or it's not good. And oh, by the way, it's for sale. If they sent it to me before it's for sale and wanted feedback on it, I'm happy to give them feedback on it. But no, they straight up just put it up for sale and then send it out for review and then get angry at me. And then they just rip off everybody else's products and whatever. Anyways, they were genuinely pissed off at me for my review of this product. But it wasn't my fault because this product had a very clear and obvious flaw. It had latency. It had extreme latency in the video feed to the point that it was completely unusable. They issued a software update and that improved it a little bit. I didn't do it myself. I talked to Andy RC or something or someone that did the update and he told me that it improved a little bit, but it's not 100%. So it's still not that great of a product. Now, randomly, a week or two ago, I had another pair show up on my doorstep and I did not expect it. I don't know who sent it to me. I don't even know the contact of the guy that I was watching or talking to before. I can only assume that he was so frustrated and upset with me that he wanted to prove me wrong. And so they improved or updated the product and sent me a new version. And in this new version, I can, in all honesty, say that it works. It works. It has great latency. It has the same latency as you would expect. As I can't tell the latency. It's low enough to the point that I can't tell. I'm not a latency snob, but I can't tell. And it has a DVR on it that while it's 720p, or it's not a 6, whatever it is, it's not the highest resolution. It is a H.264 codec. So you're getting a really nice quality picture that looks really smooth. It's like right in the middle of the Orqas and the garbage quality of the Fat Shark goggles across the entire board. So that's really nice. It has the individual eye adjustment, which is really nice. It has quadversity antennas, which honestly I don't believe do anything to help. It just gives you antlers. But hey, it's there for you. And more importantly, it comes with the modules already in the goggles, which is great because it makes it a very good value. The goggles themselves fit your head pretty nicely. The foam is great. My one single biggest complaint about these goggles at this point now is that the optics are just not that great. It cuts off the corners for me. Maybe it works well for your eyes. But overall, if you can see the screen well through these goggles, the field of view or the viewing angle is not quite the size of the, nothing is close to the Orqas. Orqas is like the biggest it gets. It's not quite the size of the Orqas or the HDO2, but it's not that far off either. It would be a toss-up between this goggle and the Skyzone 030 goggles, for which one I would personally recommend if you're looking for something less than the Orqas or the HDO2. But again, if you ask me, my opinion, it's that you should either go with the cheapest pair of analog goggles that are good, which is that EV300D or whatever that's in the link in the description below, or you should go all the way and get the HDO2 or the Orqas. The things in the middle are just not worth it. This is one of those items that are in the middle, but it's actually not that bad. So maybe if you're really considering, if you just want a better analog experience and you don't want to spend the $500 for HDO or Orqa, either this one, which is surprising to say because they really did improve it to the point where it is actually a viable product now. It's actually good. Not great, but it's good. I still would never use it over my HDO2s or my Orqas, but it is good. Or you can go with the Skyzone 030, which is also fantastic. I actually prefer that one over this one because the optics are better, but the rest of the goggle for this one is better than the Skyzone 030. So if you want to focus on the viewing experience, that one is going to be better, but if you want to focus on the rest of the goggle, this one is better. So it's kind of a toss-up. My opinion still stands. If you're going to go analog in this day and age, either you go with the lowest end one, that's good, the one that's linked in the description below, or you should go with the highest end one, which is the HDO2 or the Orqas, and strongly consider the DJI system. Now, there's a lot more to consider with the DJI system, specifically the cost of each item, each actual VTX item and each camera item is a little bit higher. That's another discussion entirely. The overall experience of the DJI system is awesome. It's phenomenally awesome, and I'm so excited to see where it goes from here. But it's still a toss-up at this point, maybe for some people if you already have invested in a lot of the analog ecosystem. Also, if you're a newcomer, you may not want to spend a lot of money, and it's kind of hard pressed. I would, if you plan on doing this for more than a couple months, which you probably will, because almost everybody that starts doing this is going to be doing it for a long time, it's worth it to just cough up the money and get the high-end stuff. You don't replace this stuff for years, for many years. I mean, the last goggles that I had that I used were my Dominator V3s, and those were 3 or 4 years old before I got another pair of goggles that I actually use on a daily basis. So if you still have Dominator V3s, don't even bother upgrading. Like, it's not worth it. Just get the DJI goggles or keep your goggles. It's not worth moving to HDO2 or Orqas or anything else. And yeah, there's a lot more to say, a lot more to discuss, but this video is long enough already, and I am now dry in the throat. So take care, floss your teeth. I'm also working with Cadex and whatnot, and all sorts of things to make more stuff. So stay tuned. I've just been super busy, haven't been able to make videos lately. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.